Welcome to Fire Your Hiring Habits with John Mitchell. This is the place where we dive into the world of talent acquisition, explore the challenges of today's workplace, and discover what it takes to build a thriving and successful organization.
Thanks for joining me once again for my conversation with Hung Lee, the editor of the leading industry newsletter, Recruiting Brainfood. We've been exploring his recruitment journey, how he launched the publication, and the enduring impacts of the pandemic. Now, Hung, in the past few years, there's been a lot of talk about upskilling and reskilling. I addressed it in my book, Fire Your Hiring Habits, but what's your perspective on upskilling and reskilling?
I think this is it's interesting you bring this up, John, because obviously everyone would say, hey, top priority, and I think absolutely I would agree with this. There was a peak of this sentiment, probably just immediately after the first peak of first wave of pandemic, where we realized, we need to redeploy a bunch of people instead of make them redundant. And it's like, we actually don't know what skills they have. So how do we do that? And it was like, you really need to care about the skills. Has anyone tracked that? Has anyone actually audited, the skills that you have in your business? And then that kind of then led naturally to, okay, how do we keep cultivating skills development within organizations? So the answer is yes, absolutely. We need to care about it. I think this comes kind of both push and pull. The employers have got to push it and provide instruction and guidance to employees. But also, employees need to go for it themselves and take their own initiative. We've seen that the availability of information has really expanded over time. Human individuals' capability has massively increased. You look at generative AI, for instance. Suddenly, a single worker can do some tremendous things that maybe would have taken teams to have delivered.
Yeah.
And anybody with any kind of sense of future-proofing their own careers will be looking into sort of technology of this type and thinking, I need to, make sure I'm skilled in this area. So I think corporate responsibility, but also equally an individual responsibility as well.
Yeah, I think the whole generative AI is a very concrete example. I mean, this has been like wildfire since what did it come out in November of last year, and now, if you haven't taken any training or upskilled or improved your capabilities, say in the past year, you haven't even touched this. And like you said, it's a game changer for a lot of different positions, that it can suddenly make you much more efficient and just, allow you to do better work faster.
Yeah, I mean, I think the experience that everyone has when they are interacting with generative AI is a sense of wonder with it. I mean, and the initial skepticism that you have, right? You hear all the stories, you try it for the first time, you're coming in with, a skeptical worldview, and then you're just shocked by what the output you get, because you think that shouldn't be possible, or I don't understand how that was possible. And then you try it again, and then you're worried because you think, oh crap, that's gonna really change, this part of my job that I, was previously really, skilled at. So what does this mean going forward? So I think the emotional journey we have with AI is very, very interesting. But I think it's important we go through that journey,
That's right.
We have to go through it because it's one of those where there's no question that the people that make themselves AI enabled will be super attractive employees compared to those that are, AI hostiles, shall we say.
It's like comparing using an old typewriter versus a word processor.
Right. I mean, John,
it's like figure it out.
Listen, I think you and I are probably long enough in the tooth to remember that era where, when I first came into the world of work, there was, this is even 2000s, it was still pretty early when it comes down to computers in recruiting. The phone was still the main thing. And I remember there was some consultants on the floor that were not using the computer they didn't embrace the computer, right? They were finger jabbing the keyboard. They were really hostile to using it because it was a phone job. And you know what? Those folks are probably they're probably not in the industry anymore.
If they haven't adapted, exactly right. I mean, you remember the time people, they didn't want to move away from paper either. It's like, oh, I'm used to filing all these faxes somewhere in a file cabinet. Faxes? What?
Right. Exactly right. Exactly right. You're going to get left behind by this if you don't kind of embrace. So yeah, my message to any recruiter is you've got to set aside time to do it. And don't actually wait for company direction on this.
I agree. You mentioned it earlier, but it's not just a company direction, but you need to be self-directed. You need to take your own upskilling, talent enhancement by the throat and say, okay, where are we going?
Yeah, 100%. You're totally responsible for yourself. And in fact, it just makes sense for yourself to make use of it and get skilled at it. I mean, when we look back on sort of the availability of this is like free stuff. It's ubiquitous. Anybody can get access to it. It's crazy that you don't make use of it. So absolutely we should. You know, I'm sure a lot of people will do very well by diving straight in.
Let me jump back to recruiting Brainfood for a minute here. What are some of the most popular topics or categories among your subscribers? How do you balance the diversity and relevance of the content that you put up there?
Yeah, really. You know, so I'm now an editor, John. So I didn't even realize this is what I was doing. But then I started kind of making these editorial decisions. Oh, crikey, I'm one of these people now. Yeah, I mean, basically, how-tos are always popular, right? So we have to take into account that, yes, recruiting Brainfood's audience is typically talent enthusiasts, people who are really into the profession. But they have various levels of experience. Some people are highly skilled, some people are just coming into the industry. So how-to type of content is always welcome, and it's always, you know, really great, particularly for those that are new to industry. Is it the most interesting thing for me personally? No, because I probably know how to at this point.
Yeah.
But I also think, okay, if it is of exceptional quality, it needs to go in because it's going to help somebody. And a big component of what Brainfood's all about is to also, you know, empower the recruiters to get better at their work. So I always try to mix in the, if you like, more deep dive kind of intellectual ruminations with some practical stuff that they can do tomorrow. That's certainly one of the ways in which I select the pieces. There's only 10 sort of per week. There could be 100 because there's lots of good stuff out there amongst the tens of thousands of crap. But I've been able to find some great stuff. But yeah, you got to cut it down. Maybe 2 or 3 are going to be, you know, hey, use this. This is going to make you better. And then the rest, I think, are going to try and introduce maybe new ideas, maybe spark a conversation somewhere, and ultimately to stimulate the mind a little bit. You know, I mean, recruiting is one of those professions, I think, that there's a lot of very intelligent people doing the job. The job itself, I think, has some risk of being quite monotonous. You know, you can sit there and, you know, just keep finding candidates, or here's a database, keep grinding through. You know, it can become that type of thing at certain moments of the day. So the reason why it's called a recruiting Brainfood is because I wanted to provide something that was entertaining in an intellectually stimulating way for people I know who are smart, but might find themselves, oh my God, I've got like 5 hours worth of sourcing to do. I say, okay, read this newsletter. It might make you feel better. You know, at hour 2, jump in and read a bit of Brainfood. It'll give you a boost.
That's awesome. Yeah, and as you were, you know, one of the things that occurs to me is you say, you know, hey, the how-to may not be the most exciting stuff for you personally, but because of your experience, because you know that stuff, you can also be discerning in which content to put up there, which is really good. So I think that's a great service you're providing to your subscribers. So you've also mentioned, you know, there's a lot of good, interesting stuff out there. What are some of the trends or innovations that you are excited about in the talent industry, and how do you keep yourself updated and informed about these latest developments?
Yeah, so there's a category of recruiting technology I've been really quite interested in for some time, and I'm actually really pleased to see that this is becoming mainstream. If you ask me this question sort of 12 months down the line, everyone's going to say, yeah, we already got this thing. Well, what it is a category of tech called interview intelligence. So what this is all about is, so again, this is like kind of a contingent upon our shift to digital comms. So an interview, of course, is one of the most important and significant moments in the recruiting process. Maybe the most important one for both parties. That's where you exchange information that's going to help you make an important decision. And in the analog era, when we were doing that one-to-one interview, that was a black hole for everyone else who wasn't in that interview, in that room. So the typical experience a recruiter might have would be you would introduce a candidate to the hiring manager. Hiring manager candidate goes into a room. They have a conversation over an hour. Both of those folks come out and they give you a report. And they'll say, yeah, that was great. Or no, that wasn't great. And like we literally have no clue what was right or wrong. We have no visibility as to actually what went on in that interview. We have to take the hiring manager's word for it, which is, one of the key frustrations of recruiting was when the hiring manager comes back and says, yeah, that guy's not strong enough. Go find another. And it's like, it says there doesn't give me anything to work on. Like, what do you mean strong? Are we doing pull-ups here or what? So anyway, what interview intelligence does is that it records the interview and it transcribes the interview. And it takes the transcription and it's able to do analysis on the transcription to be able to surface up information that nobody had previously had access to. So this is stuff like, what is the speaking time that these two participants in the interview took place in? We know, for instance, ideally in an interview, the interviewer should be speaking at most 1/3 of the time. And in fact, the candidate should be speaking 2/3 of the time as a minimum. But if we find we didn't know what was going on in that interview. We had no clue. But now with interview intelligence, we can start looking at this and start saying, Mr. Hiring Manager there has a habit of talking too much at the interview. And in fact, he's boxing out what the candidate...
He's preaching instead of interviewing.
100% right. Sound of his or her own voice. What about interrupts? What's the frequency of interrupts that occur during that interview process? Does that sort of correlate with the manager coming out of the interview and saying, yeah, I didn't get any rapport with that guy? Well, guess what? It's because you interrupted him all the time. And maybe that was like rude. It becomes very important as a debiasing kind of issue. So for instance, are we able to sort of spot patterns over time to say, it's interesting that our managers here are kind of spending less time with female candidates than they are with male candidates. Why is that? How come, a person from this company seems to be given twice as long to answer questions compared to a person from that company? Like, these may be unconscious biases that are coming out of the interview process that we previously were not able to track and much less do anything with. So now we have this information. We can start delivering it to hiring managers to say, hey, listen, here's a training opportunity for us. It seems that your interviews are like this. We think there's some areas where you can improve. Boom, great. You could give the same kind of information to the candidate. Candidate is also a full participant in this. So what if the candidate is interrupting the hiring manager? Or what if the candidate ends up, interrupting a female interviewer overly much? We can start giving education and training to the candidate also. So anyway, this category of tools, interview intelligence, they're calling it, I think will be mandatory in most companies over the next year or so. Principally because I think you can present it as a debiasing type of solution. So I think it will ride that compliance wave in, but it will provide just better, it will improve interviewers. I think it will expand the numbers of people that you permit to do interviewing, which will again accelerate your overall company capacity to do recruiting. So imagine, if you, people listening to this, think about the number of hiring managers you trust to do interviews. What percentage is that? Maybe 5%, 10%. Well, guess what? What if you could expand that to 50% of your company? Suddenly you're going to be able to outcompete the competition because you've got many more people that you trust to do the interviewing, and you can trust them because you can train them with this technology, and of course you can track them with this technology. So interview intelligence, a winning category, some great companies in play there. I think it will be one of those tools that solves a problem we never knew we had.
Sounds like it could be a game changer. And as you talk about unconscious bias. So let me ask you to put your recruiter hat on. All right. And, back when you were doing more of this directly, as opposed to just advising all of them. All things being equal in terms of experience and tangible talent, what makes one candidate more desirable than another? And this is kind of like for the candidates out there that may be listening as well, is like, hey, what are some of the things maybe they ought to be doing in order to fall into that desirable? So if I'm looking at A versus B, and they've got the same skill set, the same background, the same experience, history, maybe even, let's just make them almost twins. What are some of the other things that might set them apart in an interview?
If you've got like for like A1 and A2, either of them could be great. So the competency bar is covered on this. How do you make the decision? I would say something that is kind of cliche, but I think it's true. I think if you could express curiosity, or should I say, if you could cultivate curiosity, if you cultivate curiosity in your own mindset, that often comes through during the interview process, because you're the one suddenly asking questions, and you're the one trying to investigate all of the nooks and crannies of the opportunity that a less curious candidate may not. And I think the reason why this is important is because most companies are now aware that they cannot accurately predict the needs of the future. And in fact, all we need to do is look at the last 3 years of planet Earth for us to, be very confident that that's true. Like, none of us can predict what's going on.
That's right.
And so when companies are recruiting for jobs, they're making guesses. There's a needs must now, but they're also making guesses as to what you're going to be doing next 6-12 months down the line. But they're not entirely sure what that is. And so someone who is curious and is able to communicate that curiosity through, smart and relevant questions is going to be a person that comes across to me as an individual that can find their own path and find their own way to contribute value to the company, even though I'm not being able to define it for them. And so yeah, I think if there's A1 and A2 as candidate, one way to try and distinguish is to be cultivating a sense of curiosity, and those natural sort of questions will emerge once you have that, fixed in the way in which you think.
I love that. Cultivating curiosity, because you're right. As the future of the workforce evolves and things change, whether it's pandemic or AI or whatever, the next thing is, or the next 20 things that happen over the next couple of years, you don't know what you're going to need as an employer. You're not sure, okay, here's some base skill sets, but it's one of the challenges we see in higher education where, hey, I'm preparing for a job that in 4 years I might graduate for that might not even exist. So you want to have people that you can be flexible and can fit into the right slots as those slots open up, if you will. Last question. What are some of the goals or plans that you have for the future of recruiting Brainfood and your other initiatives? And how do you evaluate your progress and success?
Oh, you're going to hate my answer, John.
Uh-oh.
You really are. The plans is zero. And
I love it.
So let me explain what I mean. I mean, people say this all the time. Say, oh, where do you want to go with this? Hey, do you want to hire a big team? Or, hey, do you want to sell it at some point or retire on a beach? Truth is no, man. It's like this, the recruiting Brainfood emerged as like a really, like a sideline, like a hobby I was like doing. And it never had a plan. It never had a strategy. To this day, it doesn't have that. It doesn't have an end goal. So the way in which I operate is I kind of just think of what I do now. My role is really ecosystem support. So I see the recruitment industry and HR industry as a big ecosystem. HR people, recruitment tech people, candidates, hiring managers. We're kind of a part of this ecosystem, which I think is fantastic, wonderful to be part of. And I have, by complete happenstance, found myself touching, lots of elements of this ecosystem. And I feel my job now is to maintain the health of it as best I can. And where I see there's a problem or there's some area of stress, can I lend some support there? Where I see maybe there's an opportunity for another area to get stronger, can I support that? Then yeah, that's what I end up doing. So whether that means a new channel, a new event, we're connecting a few people that need to be talking to each other, that's the sort of thing that I'll be doing. So there is no
grand plan.
No grand plan and no linear path. It's more me wandering through this. I see it like a garden, right? So I have a botanical kind of worldview in this. I see me like walking through an unkept garden that I haven't designed, but I seem to be wandering around in it. And if I see a few weeds, I'm going to pull them up. If I see a flower that needs a bit of watering, I'm going to water the flower. And that's basically all I do. And so long as that garden is healthy and it's doing great and blossoming, then I'll be satisfied with that.
So to me, what I just heard was the way you evaluate your progress and success is by continuing to get fulfillment out of serving the industry. As long as you're enjoying it, you're going to keep riding the ride.
Do you know what, John? That sounds like, putting a halo on my head here. And I want to just remove that halo just a little bit. But I would say that everyone wants to feel useful, right?
Right.
I think that it's actually one of the fundamental needs of a human being is to feel needed.
Be valued.
100%. Like last time you resigned from your job, people listening to this, last time you resigned from your job, I guarantee you one of the components of you deciding to leave is because you felt that you weren't valued enough. I feel valued doing what I'm doing, and it's not uncommon or infrequent that I get people expressing this, and that gives me huge motivation to continue. And so long as that is there, and I can see that I'm adding something to this ecosystem, then yeah, my motivation is as strong as ever.
Wonderful. Thank you for your time today, and we look forward to all the great work you continue to do. Appreciate you joining us on Fire Your Hiring Habits.
Thank you very much, John. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you, man.
And that wraps up another episode of Fire Your Hiring Habits. If you've enjoyed the show, please take a moment to subscribe and get notifications for new episodes. Also, if you can spare a minute, I would greatly appreciate it if you could leave a review to help others like yourself discover the show. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.
This has been Fire Your Hiring Habits. If you want to empower your organization to reach new heights, go to johnwmitchell.com to find the techniques and tools you need to attract and retain the best team and boldly reimagine your workplace. Fire Your Hiring Habits with John Mitchell is a production of Forbes Books.